Meghan continues to interfere in my life. If she does not stop, I will formally approach the royal household and expose questions surrounding her pregnancies and her dirty yacht past.
For years, Meghan Markle's story has been sold as a carefully polished ascent, a tale of resilience, reinvention, and destiny fulfilled against impossible odds. But beneath that gleaming surface, insiders insist there has always been another version quietly circulating, shared in hushed tones at elite gatherings, yacht decks, and private clubs where reputations are made or destroyed in a sentence. This time, the spark wasn't a palace leak or a tabloid sting, but an alleged remark attributed to Rory McIlroy that detonated far beyond the room it was spoken in. One phrase, reportedly uttered without caution, resurfaced Meghan's past in a way no glossy interview ever could, and once it reached Prince Harry, sources say, it changed everything. The reaction was not public, not performative, but raw, immediate, and deeply personal. People close to the couple claim Harry demanded answers, not headlines, confronting questions he thought were long buried. That moment, according to those watching from the sidelines, marked a shift from unity to suspicion, from shared grievance to private reckoning. If you're following this unfolding drama, now is the time to stay locked in, because every detail matters and nothing is accidental. The term itself, loaded and unmistakable in elite circles, carries implications that clash violently with the humanitarian image Meghan has cultivated. It conjures a world of luxury yachts, discreet introductions, and transactional relationships that powerful men understand instantly and rarely discuss openly. Insiders insist this wasn't idle gossip, but a reference to patterns seen repeatedly in pre-fame Hollywood, where access often substitutes for opportunity. What stunned observers wasn't just that the phrase was allegedly spoken, but that it traveled so fast, crossing from sports circles into royal orbit within hours. That speed suggests recognition, not disbelief. According to sources, Harry didn't dismiss it as malicious rumor. Instead, he allegedly pressed Meghan on timelines, associations, and the gaps in stories he had previously accepted without challenge. The conversation, described as tense and unresolved, reportedly reopened wounds that had never fully healed. If you think this sounds familiar, you're not alone, and that's exactly why viewers are reacting so strongly. Drop a comment if you believe the past always finds a way back, no matter how carefully it's edited. What makes this moment explosive is the contrast it exposes. On one side, the public narrative of persecution, innocence, and moral clarity. On the other, a past whispered about by people with nothing to gain from fantasy. Royal watchers note that similar murmurs have surfaced before, only to be dismissed as misogyny or jealousy. Yet each time, the same themes reappear, suggesting something unresolved rather than invented. This is where the story pivots from rumor to consequence. Sources say Harry's reaction wasn't about jealousy, but fear. Fear that he had built a future on incomplete truth. That fear, once planted, doesn't vanish. It grows quietly, reshaping every interaction. As this allegation circulates, it's igniting outrage, sympathy, and skepticism in equal measure, pulling audiences into a debate about image versus reality. If you're still here, subscribe now, because this story is only beginning to unravel, and the next chapter may be the most revealing yet.
As the alleged remark continued to ripple outward, the private strain it placed on Harry and Meghan reportedly began surfacing in subtle but telling ways. Friends noticed fewer joint appearances, tighter body language, and a shift in how Harry spoke about their shared future. Insiders claim the confrontation didn't end with one conversation. Instead, it reopened earlier doubts Harry had pushed aside in the name of loyalty. He had defended Meghan fiercely against media attacks, believing he was protecting truth from distortion. Now, sources say he felt blindsided by the possibility that entire chapters of her past had been selectively edited before he ever entered the picture. This wasn't about scandal for scandal's sake. It was about trust, the one currency a royal marriage cannot afford to devalue. Those close to Harry insist he began quietly asking questions of his own circle, seeking reassurance that what he'd been told fully aligned with reality. And when answers came back unclear, the tension deepened. What complicates matters further is the environment in which this alleged comment surfaced. Elite social circles operate on implication rather than accusation. People don't speak unless they believe the listener already understands the reference. That's why observers say the phrase struck such a nerve. It wasn't received as shocking invention, but as confirmation of long circulating whispers. Within hours, online communities that track royal narratives began connecting dots, resurfacing old photos, guest lists, and timelines previously dismissed as coincidence. The more they looked, the more patterns they claimed to see.
This sudden resurgence didn't just fuel gossip, it reignited a cultural divide. Supporters argue Meghan is once again being punished for ambition, while critics say ambition doesn't excuse obscured truth. If you're watching this unfold and forming your own theory, tap like now so this conversation stays visible. Behind closed doors, sources say Harry's frustration wasn't explosive, but heavy, the kind that lingers. He allegedly questioned why certain friendships were never mentioned, why specific years were glossed over, why explanations felt rehearsed. That's when the word divorce reportedly surfaced, not as a threat, but as a possibility spoken aloud in anger by someone close to the situation. In royal culture, even whispering it is seismic. Observers note that once that door opens, it never fully closes. The marriage, once framed as a united front against the world, suddenly looked vulnerable to internal fracture. This is the contrast that has captivated audiences. A couple who condemned intrusion now facing scrutiny from within. Stay with us, because the deeper this story goes, the more it challenges everything we thought we knew. Public reaction has been predictably polarized. Some dismiss the entire episode as reckless hearsay amplified by misogynistic framing. Others argue that repeated smoke eventually demands investigation for fire. What's undeniable is the momentum. Media outlets that once avoided these angles are now cautiously referencing alleged remarks and sources familiar with the exchange, signaling a shift from taboo to discussion. That shift alone tells a story. It suggests confidence that the narrative won't collapse under scrutiny, and as more voices weigh in, the pressure on Harry and Meghan intensifies, not to perform unity, but to clarify reality. If this tension continues, it won't be tabloids that define the outcome. It will be what happens when private truth collides with public image. Subscribe now and turn notifications on, because the next section dives into why this alleged past refuses to stay buried. What makes this chapter impossible to dismiss is how often similar stories have surfaced from entirely different directions over the years. Long before royalty entered the picture, Hollywood insiders spoke quietly about a social circuit where access mattered more than auditions, and introductions were currency. Observers say Meghan moved confidently through that world, cultivating relationships that opened doors others never even saw. At the time, it was framed as hustle, networking, survival. But in hindsight, critics argue it established a pattern of strategic proximity that now fuels these renewed allegations. The contrast is stark. A woman celebrated publicly for breaking barriers is privately accused of navigating shortcuts that contradict the image. This dissonance is what keeps the conversation alive. People aren't reacting to one remark, they're reacting to a narrative that suddenly feels incomplete. Sources close to Harry suggest this realization has been quietly destabilizing. He reportedly began reassessing moments he once dismissed as media distortion, certain defensive reactions, certain silences, certain stories that never quite aligned. None of this proves wrongdoing, but doubt doesn't need proof to do damage. It only needs inconsistency. Insiders claim Harry struggled with the idea that his crusade against press intrusion may have blinded him to legitimate questions. That internal conflict, they say, is far more painful than any headline. If you've ever defended someone only to later question what you were protecting, you understand why this has hit such a nerve. Let us know in the comments if loyalty can survive unanswered questions. As speculation intensified, the ripple effects spread beyond the marriage. Royal commentators began discussing institutional implications. The monarchy doesn't operate on emotion, it operates on stability. Any figure perceived as unpredictable or controversial becomes a liability, regardless of popularity. While no official action has been hinted at, insiders note a noticeable cooling in how Meghan is referenced in royal-adjacent spaces. Invitations dry up quietly. Doors close politely. This isn't punishment, it's containment. The system protects itself first. And that reality may be dawning on Harry in a way it never has before. The contrast between the freedom he sought and the consequences he now faces is becoming impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, public discourse has taken on a sharper edge. Social media analysts note a shift in tone. Less outrage, more interrogation. Viewers are asking for timelines, receipts, explanations. That demand signals fatigue with surface narratives. People want coherence. They want truth, or at least transparency. And every moment of silence amplifies suspicion. Supporters argue silence is dignity. Critics see it as avoidance. In the absence of clarity, audiences fill the gap themselves. This is where reputations are truly reshaped, not by what is said, but by what is left unanswered. If you're finding this analysis cuts deeper than tabloid noise, make sure you're subscribed, because we follow patterns, not propaganda. What's emerging now is a reframing of the story altogether. This isn't about a single alleged comment, or even a single past. It's about whether a relationship built on shared defiance can survive internal doubt. Those close to Harry say he is wrestling with an uncomfortable truth, that love doesn't erase history, and reinvention doesn't nullify accountability. Whether this leads to resolution or rupture remains unknown, but one thing is certain: once the past is questioned aloud, it can no longer be quietly managed. And as this saga continues, the question isn't whether the allegations are fair, it's whether the silence surrounding them is sustainable. Behind the scenes, the alleged fallout has reportedly begun reshaping how both Harry and Meghan move through their public and private lives. Insiders say conversations that were once collaborative have turned cautious, with every word weighed for implication. Harry, who once spoke freely about building a new life unburdened by royal constraint, is said to be confronting a harsher realization. Freedom without trust feels hollow. Friends describe him as withdrawn, less reactive, more contemplative, as if replaying moments he once brushed aside. That internal recalibration matters, because it suggests this isn't a manufactured crisis, but a lived one. When doubt replaces certainty, even the strongest partnerships feel fragile. The public, meanwhile, has become an active participant in the unraveling. Viewers aren't simply consuming the story, they're dissecting it, comparing interviews, timelines, and past statements with forensic attention. Old clips resurface, phrases reanalyzed, expressions scrutinized. What once felt like isolated controversies now appeared to some as part of a larger pattern. This is the danger of narrative fatigue. When audiences sense repetition without resolution, sympathy erodes. Meghan's defenders argue this scrutiny is unfair and gendered, that ambition in women is endlessly reframed as manipulation. Critics counter that transparency should not be conditional on popularity. If you've noticed this shift too, take a moment to like the video, because engagement signals which conversations matter. Within royal-adjacent circles, the mood is described as wary but unsurprised. Veteran courtiers have seen similar arcs before, where outsiders enter with promise and leave under cloud. The difference here is the digital age. Every whisper becomes permanent. Every silence is interpreted. Sources say advisors are quietly preparing for multiple scenarios, not because a decision has been made, but because unpredictability demands readiness. This doesn't mean intervention is imminent, but it does mean patience is wearing thin. Institutions value consistency, and prolonged ambiguity is destabilizing. That reality may be colliding with Meghan's preference for control over narrative, creating a stalemate neither side can easily escape. For Harry, this moment reportedly feels isolating, estranged from parts of his family and now questioning the foundation of his chosen life. He stands between worlds with diminishing refuge. Observers note the irony. In fleeing scrutiny, he may have placed himself in a position where scrutiny is unavoidable, not from tabloids, but from conscience. This internal conflict is what gives the story its gravity. It's not spectacle alone. It's the human cost of unresolved truth. And as audiences sense that depth, interest intensifies. If you're still watching, subscribe now, because stories driven by internal fracture rarely resolve quietly. As this chapter unfolds, one truth becomes clearer. Reinvention can inspire, but it cannot erase. The past doesn't demand punishment, it demands acknowledgement. Whether Meghan chooses silence, clarification, or confrontation will shape not only public opinion, but private outcomes. And whether Harry chooses reassurance or reckoning will define his future far more than any headline. The tension now is not about who is right, but about what happens when belief collides with doubt and neither yields. At this stage, the story no longer belongs solely to rumor or defense, but to consequence. When questions linger unanswered, they don't fade, they compound, reshaping perception inch by inch until certainty feels unreachable. Observers say this is where the situation now stands, suspended between denial and disclosure. Meghan's silence, once strategic, now reads as deliberate, while Harry's distance signals an internal recalculation few expected to witness. Together, those signals form a narrative louder than any statement. Audiences sense it, institutions recognize it, and advisors quietly prepare for what comes next. If you're still here following every development, share this video now, because these moments are rarely isolated and often precede decisive turns. Sources suggest the pressure is no longer external, but internal, driven by trust strained under the weight of unanswered history. Harry's role has subtly shifted from defender to evaluator, a position he never intended to occupy. That shift alone changes the trajectory of everything that follows. In royal adjacent circles, there is an understanding that stability is restored not by emotion, but by resolution. Either questions are addressed or distance becomes permanent. This is why commentators now speak less about scandal and more about sustainability. A relationship built on reinvention can survive scrutiny, but only if truth is consistent. If you believe honesty matters more than image, tap the like button now so this discussion stays visible. There is also a broader cultural reckoning unfolding beneath the headlines. Audiences are increasingly resistant to polished narratives that demand belief without verification. They want alignment between words and timelines, between values and actions. That demand has transformed passive viewers into active analysts, reshaping how public figures are held accountable. Meghan's story sits at the center of that shift, not because it is unique, but because it is symbolic. It reflects a moment where charisma alone no longer shields inconsistency. For Harry, this evolution is personal, forcing him to reconcile his desire for peace with the discomfort of ambiguity. If this story resonates with you, subscribe now, because we track these shifts long after the noise fades. As this chapter approaches its turning point, one outcome feels unavoidable. Silence will no longer control the narrative. Whether through clarification, separation, or continued distance, resolution will come, because unresolved doubt demands it. The past does not need to be punished to matter. It only needs to be acknowledged. For viewers, this story offers more than intrigue. It offers a lens into how modern power, image, and accountability collide. Stay engaged, share your perspective below, and keep watching, because when belief fractures, the aftermath always reveals more than the initial spark ever could. This moment also challenges audiences to question why certain stories provoke fury while others inspire forgiveness. Bias, loyalty, and fatigue all play roles in shaping reaction. Recognizing that complexity doesn't excuse behavior, but it explains response. Understanding that distinction is essential for interpreting what happens next, both for the individuals involved and the institution watching closely from the sidelines worldwide today.